Good morning, children. Sayana. So, I hope you must have understood that what is indigo and indigo cultivation. Children, this is uh, when we talk about indigo. I think after continuous 2 to 3 classes, you must be able to answer that which chapter am I talking about. This is chapter number 3, ruling the countryside in history. Children, in the last class we discussed about the two different types of cultivation of indigo, niche and royalty. I hope you must able to memorize. Okay, now the thing is, talked a lot about the indigo cultivation, fine, but I really want to know that whether it is clear, this term indigo cultivation is clear with you or not. So demand for indigo we have already discussed, but how was indigo cultivated? See children, getting again back to this. Okay, there were two main systems of indigo cultivation that I have already explained to you, niche and royalty. Fine. When the within the system of niche cultivation, the planter produced indigo in the lands the of the of the farmers whom they controlled. Okay, and he controlled directly. He either bought the land or rented it from the zamindars and produced indigo by directly employing laborers, slaves, or hired laborers, you can say. Now, what was the problem with niche cultivation? The planters found it difficult to expand their area under niche cultivation. Now, how? See, children, if you have this, we have already discussed. This is just a small revision. Okay, what was it in under niche cultivation? That when you are actually working on a hired land, okay, you cannot expand your land, isn't it? You cannot at all. Fine. Same was the problem of niche cultivation. Now what next happened? Indigo could be cultivated only on fertile lands, that is, it could not be cultivated on rough land, and these were already densely populated. Only small plots scattered over the landscape could be acquired. Planters needed large areas and compact blocks to cultivate indigo. Now, what next happened in plantations? Where could they get such land from? Naturally, now this was a question of concern for every planter, that where shall we get land for indigo? They attempted to lease in the land around indigo factory and evict the peasants from the area, but this always led to conflicts and tension. Nor was labor easy to mobilize. A large plantation required a vast number of hands to operate, and labor was needed precisely at a time when peasants were usually busy with their rice cultivation. Now, see, if you think that, let's take an example of our classroom. Okay, we have 40 children in our class, or you say 35, maximum 40 children are there in a class. And what if after the teacher, if a teacher assigns one single monitor for to handle those 40 students, is it possible? No, one monitor isn't enough. No, that is why we keep 4 monitors, isn't it? Or at least 2 monitors, fine, to balance the, at least to have that much work divided. So there over in the cultivation, in indigo cultivation, in the niche style cultivation, what happened? That same was the problem. The land was vast, cultivation was wide, and there was nobody to handle or help in for the indigo cultivation in the niche style cultivation. So it became very difficult for whom? It became very difficult for the planters, the people who owned the land, okay, or rented the land, planters, to have employees for the indigo cultivation. Now, next, niche cultivation on a large scale also required many plows and bullocks. It also required many plows and bullocks. Obviously, when it is a vast land, you need bullocks as well as a plow to drag and actually, you can say, turn up the soil. Fine. 1 bighha of indigo cultivation required 2 plows. This meant that a planter with 1,000 bighas would need 2,000 plows, just double. Investing on a purchase and maintenance of plows was a big problem. Obviously, you have to what do you have to look after for the person who was plowing and the bullocks also. That is, maintenance of both men and animal became very difficult. It was really very difficult. Obviously, when you are maintaining, when you are actually taking care of two species simultaneously, it's not two people, it's two species. One is animal and the other is the human being. You are looking after two species all together. It takes enormous effort to go ahead with the, what you can say, responsible managing. Nor could supplies be easily got from peasants since their plows and bullocks were busy on their rice fields. Apart from this, indigo plantation was the essence, or you can say it was the requirement, necessity of whom? It was the requirement of the East India Company, the British people. It was not the requirement or the necessity of the Indian farmers. It was imposed on the Indian farmers. It was actually imposed on the Indian farmers, and it could not be easily eradicated from their course. With the you can say point of view from the Britishers, Indian farmers were happy with their crop cultivation, that is rice, tea, coffee, etc. But what was not relevant or what was necessary for them, for the Indian farmers, it was indigo cultivation. Indigo became an essence, it became an important crop or object for the European traders because it was cheap and easily available in the Indian fields. But it could not be cultivated in the Indian fields due to several problems. Let's see what were the problems. Till the late 19th century, planters were therefore reluctant to expand the area under niche cultivation. Less than 25% of fields, again, indigo was under this system. Less than 25% of land producing indigo was under this system. The rest was under alternative mode of cultivation, that is the Royalty system. Now let's think about let's discuss about what was the royalty system. Before that, we have two definitions coming up with us, that is slave, a person who is owned by someone else, the slave owner. A slave has no freedom and is compelled to work for the master. Then one more term was there, yes, plantation, a large farm operated by a planter employing various forms of forced labor. Plantations are associated with the production of coffee, sugarcane, tobacco, tea, and cotton. The other term which came up, bigha, that we have already done, a unit of measurement of land. Before British rule, the size of this area varied. In Bengal, the British standardized it to about 1/3 of an acre. I repeat, 1/3 of an acre. Now, indigo on the land of royals. Now, who were the royals? Okay, under the royalty system, the planters forced the royals to sign a contract. Now, this is an agreement. An agreement had to be signed, was to be signed by the peasants. Now, this was called as satta. This was called as satta. At times, headmen. At times, they pressurized the village men. They pressurized whom? Village men. or village headman, sorry, or you can say the mukhia, to sign the contract on the behalf of riots. Okay, those who signed the contract got cash advances from the planters at low rates of interest to produce indigo. Now, under this royalty system, what happened? They knew. Who knew? The British, the European, or Europe, not European actually. The British people knew this. The British planters actually knew that none of the Indian people are going to sign any kind of agreement or contract for the purchase, sale, or renting of land. None of the Indian farmers. Okay. Now, what policy did they go ahead with? They actually planned a policy that they should catch hold of the village headman, that is the mukhia, and he shall be pressurized and he should sign the contract, that is the satta. He should sign the contract or agreement, sorry, on the behalf of the fellow followers, village fellow followers. And then what happened? When you sign a contract for renting or being a part of this all planting process, what will happen? Naturally, the cash you have got on low interest and advances, you have to return. And nobody, because due to, you can say, less literacy level, low literacy level, or low education facilities, and that too people belonging to the village, it became quite impossible for them to figure out how much amount they got, what was the interest, and how much they have to initially paid, what was the initial amount, and what was the final amount decided after the interest and all whatever whatsoever was taken. This could not be figured out by any of the farmers or the, you can say, peasants. This took enormous times. You can say families paid the interest amount since ages. Nobody could understand, because it was due to the lack of education which actually contributed to such a condition. Now, those who signed this we have done, but the loan, but yes, this comes the main important point. But the loan committed to the riot, to cultivating indigo on at least 25% of the area under his holding. The planter provided the seed and drill, while the cultivators prepared the soil, sowed the seed, and looked after the crop. Children, you can see workers harvesting indigo in early 19th century Bengal from Goldsworthy Grant, Rural Life in Bengal. You can see it is 1860. You can see the Indian peasants working like this. And here over you have the indigo plant being brought from the fields to the factories. See children, these are the, see, those who know or those who have their roots right in their hometowns, in their village towns, they all must have seen how the harvest has been is being brought to the final destination, you can say. Till date, many people are bringing, you can say, wheat, maize, rice crops in carts as well as tractors. So next is now, how was indigo produced, which is an important question. The indigo villages, these are all pictures you can see children. Women usually carried the indigo plant to the vats. What was a vat? A fermenting or a storage vessel. Okay, now let's have the indigo villages were usually around indigo factories owned by the planters. After harvest, the indigo plant was taken to vats in the indigo factory. Children, I can give you a question that how was indigo produced, manufactured, and finally dispatched? Okay, so answer this question properly. Read this, understand this concept properly. First, indigo villages. Where were indigo villages and what were the indigo villages? indigo villages were the villages which were meant, or you can say made specially for the plantation of indigo. Naturally, if somebody is planting indigo, any crop, so they will think, sorry, they will settle around the particular crop only, so that is no harm is, what am I saying, okay, sorry, no mm, no particular harmful effects are being faced by such food crop, isn't it? Because this was a, you can say, in a, it was an important as well as crucial production, where they had to pay, where they actually paid for even a single penny and even a single seed, so they did not want to bear any kind of risk. After the harvest, the indigo plant was taken to the vats in the indigo factory. 3 or 4 vats were needed to manufacture the dye. Each vat had a separate function. The leaves stripped of the indigo plant were first soaked in warm water in a vat known as fermenting or steeper vat for several hours. Okay, when initial product was brought, it was soaked in warm water. Then, when the plants fermented, the liquid began to boil and bubble. Now the rotten leaves were taken out and the liquid drained into another vat that was placed just below the first vat. In the second vat, what was done? The solution was continuously stirred and beaten with paddles. When the liquid gradually turned green and then blue, lime water was added to the vat. Gradually, indigo separated out in flakes. A muddy sediment settled at the bottom of the vat and a clear liquid rose to the surface. The liquid was drained off and the sediment, the indigo pulp, transferred to another vat known as the settling vat, and then pressed and dried for sale. So this is the way how indigo was manufactured and produced. So here you can see the last stage of production of workers stamping and cutting the indigo pulp that has been pressed and molded. In the background you can see a worker carrying away blocks for drying. You can see children. Okay. Yes, children. This is the next. Then when you have, what was the initial? When the crop was delivered to the planter after the harvest, a new loan was given to the ryot and the cycle started all over again. Peasants, a new loan was given to the ryot and the cycle started all over again. Peasants who were initially tempted by the loans soon realized how harsh the system was. The price they got for the indigo they produced was very low, and the cycle of loans never ended, as I told you in the starting only. There were other problems too. The planters usually insisted that indigo be cultivated on the best soils, in which the peasants preferred to cultivate rice. Indigo, moreover, had deep roots and it exhausted the soil rapidly. After an indigo harvest, the land could not be sown with rice. This was the problem, that indigo was a sort of poisonous crop also, so it made the fertile land go barren. So with that was not fit for cultivation. So this system of Nij and Rohiti, which was prominent in Madras, fine, this was prominent in Madras, and Madras, was so famous at that time also. Madras, the people in Madras could not go ahead with the cultivation of rice. Now, this is one more topic left, the Blue Rebellion, and this will hopefully continue in the next class. Thank you and Sairam. Children, one important point that I want to say, your work, whatever written work you are getting, kindly keep on continue, because you will, from now onwards, you will be getting work daily, because we are almost over with the half yearly first term, half yearly, or you can say term 1 syllabus. Okay, For social studies, whatever work you are getting, keep on noting down in your fair notebooks. I repeat, keep on doing it in fair notebooks. Thank you and Sai Ram.